Hockey Inside Out, presented to you by The Gazette.
Welcome to Hockey Inside Out. I'm Gazette sports editor Stu Cowan, joined today by Pat Hickey, and we have a special guest from Sports Illustrated, TSN, former Gazette columnist also, Michael Farber, who's also doing some work now for NBC, I hear.
Yeah, I'm doing work on their rivalry series. It's not seen in Canada, it's in the States, and I've written a couple of shows for them and also put together some top 10 lists.
Great. I know you did a column recently, Mike, in Sports Illustrated about the lack of scoring in the NHL. How big of a problem is that, and how can it be fixed?
Gary Bettman has grown the game, but the game on the ice is stagnant right now because scoring is down. Larry Quinn, the former president of the Buffalo Sabres, thinks this is the biggest problem in the game. We've seen pads shrink in terms of the height. We've seen changes with the net, but still scoring is up a tick, but not as much as it needs to be, in my opinion.
How much does coaching have to do with that, Pat?
I think it has a lot to do with it. I mean, teams just aren't getting a lot of shots. You're seeing a lot of shot blocking. It's defense first. The Canadians will tell you that, you know, their whole strategy, they're not opposed to scoring goals. They want to score goals. and actually, you know, they were the fourth leading scoring team in the NHL last year. They're in the middle of the pack this year, but they're almost at 3 goals a game, which is a pretty good production. And but it's just, there's just so much emphasis on defense, it's hard to get shots.
Let's talk about coaching. In Bobby Orr's new book, he mentions the fact that he doesn't think there's any coach today at the NHL, amateur, any level that would allow him to play his style of game. Could Bobby Orr's style still work in today's NHL?
Oh, I think it could, because he was Bobby Orr. Yeah, I mean, Bobby Orr's style could work. Does PK Subban's style work? Well, I still don't trust him on the penalty kill. Not enough PK for PK. He's averaging about a minute per game. And at the end of the Dallas game, it was Douglas Murray out there in PK Subban's spot.
Yeah, I think they don't feel they have to use him. They want to save him for other situations. There might also be some political implications there, too. He's got a contract coming up. They want to try to keep his minutes down, maybe. They don't want to see him.
Well, if he's a Norris Trophy winning defenseman,
you would think that he should be out there on the PK because it's for the best defenseman.
There's arguments from people who didn't think PK should have won the Norris Trophy last year, saying how can a defenseman win the Norris Trophy when he doesn't kill penalties? I know you said you ran into, speaking of Norris Trophy winners, you were speaking with Chris Chelios recently, I understand. How's he doing?
He's doing great because Chris Chelios' world is always wonderful. Never a bad day in Chelly's world. He's going into the Hall of Fame in early November. But he talked about being the captain here. He was co-captain, you remember, with Guy Carbonneau, and he said it didn't work. He said because he felt he was in a tug of war, an English and French tug of war, and people needed to defend him, including Red Fisher of the Gazette. And he said it was an uncomfortable situation. Not until he got to Chicago later on did he feel he was ready for the captaincy.
I think language is always a problem. We saw it with Mike King. We saw it with Sakko Koivu. We haven't seen it so much with Brian Giunta, who's made little efforts to throw some French into
being an American,
things like that. Maybe it changes that dynamic a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see, you know, whether there'll ever be another French. I don't see a French-Canadian captain on the horizon. So.
Speaking of the language issue, I was sitting beside Michael at the Dallas game, and he brought up a point. How come at the Bell Center the referees don't make the penalty announcements in both languages?
Well, some of them can, and I don't see why the referees who can, Mark Jeanette, Dave Jackson from the West Island, I mean, these guys can make bilingual announcements. And this is a hobby horse of mine that started in '08, and it just struck me that if for the fans, 80% of whom at the Bell Center speak French as a first language, I mean, it's a courtesy to them. Gary Bettman says, no, we want uniformity across the board. And I think the real reason is that so many teams are paranoid when they see a French-speaking referee. Yeah. This only underscores the point. They think they all favor the Canadians.
Yeah, I think that language is always going to be a problem. I was mentioning to Stu earlier today that, you know, we were in Winnipeg, and they have the anthem in English only. That's a fairly significant French-Canadian population in Manitoba, and I think, you know, that should have been, you know, at least a bilingual anthem. At the same time, I was watching the Basel tennis the other day, and I was surprised that all the announcements were in English.
Now, you were around in '93 when the Canadians won the Cup, covering it for the Gazette. What was the language issue there in the room? Was there
I didn't sense the language issue then. I think the issue is, are you a winning team? And when you're a winning team, that spackles over all kinds of problems.
We'll be back after this, and we'll discuss a little bit more about what takes a winning team in the locker room, what kind of players you need in there. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hockey Inside Out. Michael, you were talking about what kind of locker room does it take to win in the NHL?
My favorite locker rooms have been smart locker rooms. I mean, I was around the Islanders in the late 70s and the early 80s, Canadians, especially 79 and again in the late 80s. And generally the best teams in all sports, the Baltimore Orioles in the mid-70s, you like being around smart people. Now there are exceptions. The Edmonton Oilers, their dynasty teams, there weren't a whole lot of cerebral folks on those teams. They happen to be very good at hockey, however. And so it takes all types. But different locker rooms, Pat, have different feels.
Yeah, I think I don't know whether it's smart, but I think it's guys who understand the game, understand what they're doing, they understand their roles.
And
that's the most important thing is they understand their roles and they play the roles. And but you get in the Canadiens locker room, you've got lots of guys who are easy to talk to. You know, can talk about things other than hockey, even if it's just Carey Price talking about country music and rodeo. But, you know, it's a fun room to be around. You can feel a good vibe in that room.
I'll put you on the spot here. Who's the smartest guy in the room, Pat?
Oh, George Parros by a long shot. I mean, you know, the guy's, what is he, the fourth smartest pro athlete in North America, according to the Sporting News. You know, obviously a guy has a degree from Princeton. I don't know, after that concussion the other day, I want to take a little more time off. But again, you know, he's a warrior. He's a competitive guy, and he wants to get back in there, and he'll probably be back in there this weekend.
Speaking of smart guys, Michael, I know you're not surprised by Patrick Roy's success in Colorado as a coach. You think he's a pretty smart hockey mind?
I think he has a good hockey mind, and I think he paid his dues by riding the buses. Yes, it was his team, but yeah, he put the work in with his junior team in Quebec City. I think whatever problems he have will be self-inflicted because he is so emotional. But in terms of a junior hockey coach ready to coach in the NHL, there was no one more qualified.
Now, I think that there's an ironic little twist here because he's the antithesis of his bête noire, Mario Tremblay, who came in without a coaching experience, resisted any effort to get that experience. And I think that was one of the things that I think today, if Mario Tremblay got another shot, he'd be a better coach because he's with Jacques Lemaire all those years and got some experience. But they wanted him to go to Roger Nielsen's summer camp for coaches after his first year there, and he refused to go. He said, I don't need it. And I think that's the thing. Patrick Roy realized he needed that experience. He went and got it. The same thing, you know, you see Alain Vigneault went back after his first experience here in Montreal, went back and coached in the juniors. Michel Therrien, after the first experience here, went back and coached in the American Hockey League. You need that experience.
Speaking of experience, I know, Mike, you told me when you first started covering the Canadiens, you learned a lot in the old, was it brasserie across the street in the Alexis Nihon Plaza?
That's right, drinking club soda, because you were welcome at that time. And maybe once or twice a month after practice at the Forum, players would go to this brasserie for lunch, and you were always welcome. It was just to talk, and it was about to learn the game. I think a lot of young writers, Pat, don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, I think that, you know, in the generation before that, I'm a little older than you are, and you went to Toe Blake's Tavern and you found the same thing. It's, you know, but that was, or you went down, Henri Richard had his own tavern, and you'd see him slinging beer there occasionally with his brother Denny. You know, that part of the thing has changed. I don't know about you, Mike, but I can't afford to go to most of the players, most of the places the players hang out today. So.
Who were the favorite Canadians for you to interview, Michael, back when you were covering the team on a regular basis?
Well, going back to the late 80s, you'd walk into that dressing room and there'd be so many players you'd want to talk to. You'd just say, gee, I want to talk to Ludwig. I want to talk to Chelios. I want to talk to Roy. I want to talk to Schneider. There was always somebody, Odeline. And I thought in past couple of years, maybe not now, and I'm not around the team like you are, Pat, there were fewer and fewer guys. I mean, I'd always gravitate to Matthew Darche. He was my go-to guy because he always had something interesting to say, and I enjoy P.K. Subban. But at those times, I like players who could explain what they did and why they did it on the ice.
Now this year's team, Pat, they're sort of two different teams. They're playing better on the road than they are at home. How do you explain that?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
You said they played a road game
they
at home.
They played a perfect road game at home last night, you know, and things like that. I think that, you know, I'm not sure whether it's the opponents that they've had or, you know, they've had some. They should have had better success on that 5-game road trip, that 5-game homestand they had here, because they played some bad teams and they had trouble with them. They went
Especially
2-3.
coming off that really good
Coming
road
off
trip.
the really good road trip, and you know, they won that first game back, which is always the important game, the game that, you know, teams normally have trouble with after they've been away for a week, 10 days. They won that game, and then they went into a real funk. So it's hard to figure out. I think that this team, this philosophy of the team, is better suited to playing on the road, because they know they have to grind it out. Subconsciously, I think when you're at home, you're trying to please the fans. It's just different. But the other night, they played just the same way they did in New York, and the result was a win.
Well, Michael, with your TSN reporters, you usually do your thumbs up or thumbs down. I guess David Desharnais would be the thumbs down for the Canadians this year. Who would you give a thumbs up to?
Well, I'd give thumbs up to the goaltending. I mean, Price has been very good, and he's getting closer and closer to securing a spot in Sochi. And Budaj, whenever they put him in, is fabulous. Now, he's Peter Budaj for a reason. I mean, he's not going to be a #1 goalie in the league, but if you spot him right, and Michel Therrien has done a nice job with that, and Carey Price, with the help, I presume, of Stefan Waite, looks like a better goalie this year.
I joked after the shutout the other night, maybe Budaj can change his citizenship to Canadian before the Sochi games.
Well, he's also battling for a spot in Sochi for the Slovakian team. He'll be the perfect backup for Yaroslav Halak.
Carey Price, he looks like he's standing up more in the net
Yes,
this
he
year.
is. He's more he's better position. He's going back to the things that Rolly Melanson had him doing.
Yeah, you sort of compared goalie coaches to pitching coaches.
Right, because one size doesn't fit all. Sometimes you have to establish a rapport. Apparently, Waite has one with Price. Talking to an Eastern Conference goalie coach, I said, what was the problem with Price last year? He said, from his perspective, he wasn't tracking the puck. He would make a save and then default back into the middle of the ice. He didn't use his size to peer around screens, and he was getting burned.
Michael, great to see you back in the Gazette building. We've missed you.
Thank you.
Best of luck with NBC, TSN, and everything else you're doing out there. Pat, thanks a lot. We hope you enjoyed the show this week, and we'll be back again next week.